get started then. So good morning, everybody. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our virtual event this morning to celebrate International Women's Day. Some of you may know me already, but if I've not met you before, my name's Julian and I'm the Partnership Chair at Shepperton Wedderburn. And it's my privilege to have been asked once again by my colleagues in our gender focus group to chair this event this morning. As you probably know, each year International Women's Day selects a theme, and this year's theme is breaking the bias. And we've chosen to use this as an opportunity to talk about imposter syndrome. Now, I know we have over 175 people on the call this morning. I think the numbers are still climbing. So I think that suggests that this topic has really struck a chord with everybody. And I'm really pleased that so many of you have been able to come along and join us for what I hope is going to be a very interesting discussion. Can I just start by expressing my thanks to my colleagues in our events team, not least for dealing with a last minute hiccup a couple of minutes ago, and for the members of the steering committee of our gender focus group, because they have led all of the organisation for the event today. And I'd also like to thank our wonderful panel of speakers who've agreed to come along and join us today, and I will now introduce them to you. So firstly, can I introduce my colleague, Emma Guthrie. Emma's a colleague of mine at Shepperton Wedderburn, and as well as her day job as a senior associate working in our real estate team, Emma also has the privilege of holding the position of Assistant Chief Guide at Girl Guiding. And when we were planning this event, we thought that Emma would have a really useful perspective to share around how organisations like the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, the fantastically acronym WAGs, can empower girls and young women to become confident leaders. Now, WAGs operates across 152 countries throughout the world, and by sheer coincidence, it is one of the charity partners this year with International Women's Day. And so it's the charity that we have chosen to partner with today. And I'll let you have a little bit more information about how you can support them in their work later on. Our second panelist is Penni MBE. As you can tell, Sally has a very professional setup, so she's very used to these types of events, as well as being an award-winning barrister and public speaker. She's also a diversity leader, a radio broadcast, which I think accounts for the very professional mic, a charity patron, and a non-executive director on a variety of boards. And through these various roles, Sally has shared her experience and expertise across a wide range of areas, including governance, employment law, and cyber security. And finally, can I introduce you to my good friend, Nicky Denegri. Nikki is a principal consultant at head of coaching at Kissing with Confidence, which is a skills development company. And Nikki has over 15 years experience in learning and development, with a particular interest in coaching and mentoring, which I think is another interesting perspective for our discussion today. So just a few quick housekeeping points before we start. We now have over 200 people joining the call, which I'm absolutely delighted with. So the format of the event this morning is going to be a panel discussion, but I'm also very keen that we get your input. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A function. So throughout the session, there'll be the opportunity for you to pose questions to the panel, and I'll try and get to as many of those as we can towards the end. If you want to direct your question to any particular panelist, it would really help us if you could try to make that clear in your question. And my colleagues who are working in the background to look at the Q&A will help direct the questions for me. Next to that, you'll also see the chat function button, and that's going to be available throughout the session if you want to post any comments or any feedback. We're not going to be picking up questions in that, so please just use that for commentary. But on the chat function, we're also going to be posting details of how you could make a donation to the Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. And also we're going to post some links of some of the projects that they're involved in. And then finally, we're also going to post some details that Kissing with Confidence have kindly agreed to share with us, which is their Wonderwall facility. So this is a specialist resource. It's password protected. You can access it at your leisure. And in context of today's discussion, its focus is going to be on recognising and managing, and I think this is a lovely way of describing imposter syndrome, your gremlin. So the self-limiting voice, which often in part drives people's imposter syndrome. Now, if you don't catch it in the chat because you're too busy listening, don't worry. We will put out a follow-up email after the event today, and we'll send it to everybody who's registered for the event, and the details will be in there along with a recording. Now, one of the challenges of this medium is that there is a hard cutoff, I'm afraid, at 11 o'clock. So I will make sure that we wrap up in plenty of time. But if we all disappear off into the ether at 11 o'clock, then don't be alarmed, and thank you very much for joining us. So let's get started. Ladies, first of all, thank you very much for coming along, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And when I was preparing for today, I was actually curious to think, when was the term imposter syndrome first coined? And usual research tools, I found out that it was first recognised by psychologists in the late 1970s. So that was when I was around 8 or 9 years old. And what struck me was that it absolutely should have been something that I was aware of and alive to as I grew up and developed through my career. And yet I would say that it was probably well into my 30s, maybe even into my early 40s, before I recognised the feelings that I had experienced, and if I'm honest, do still experience from time to time, for what they are. And for me, I think that's probably best summed up as that feeling that I was at any moment about to be tapped on the shoulder, that I would have been found out. And as we say in Scotland, the game would have been a bogey at that stage, and the game would have been up. And I thought for a long time that was just me, because we don't talk about these feelings enough, which is why I'm so delighted that we're having the opportunity to do so today. So I'd like to start by asking each of you, I think, for your personal reflections. Is it something that you've experienced? How has it made you feel? And how have you dealt with it? So Nikki, can I maybe start with you?
Hello, Gillian. It's lovely to be here with you and everyone else. I thought really 3 things I'd like to share with you about imposter syndrome. So one was academically. I did well at school, but when I went to uni, I chose the wrong thing and I didn't get a brilliant first degree. But subsequently, I've done a lot of study and done very well each time that I have studied. And I shared with you last week that, in fact, I was studying with Open University, a psychology degree, and every essay that I turned in would come back with a first on it. And after a while, I got to thinking, this is just luck. And I didn't even graduate. And periodically, OU would write to me and say, would you like to graduate? And I think, no, it's not worth the paper it's written on. And I'd just like to say, if there are any psychologists in the room, that's not about psychology. And also, that's not how I feel about it today. But this recurrent theme through that and other qualifications that I've done about it just being down to good luck. And that's a sign of imposter syndrome as opposed to hard work and effort. The second thing, professionally, you mentioned I'm a coach. And 99 times out of 100, I don't understand the technical aspects of someone's job. And for a long time, I would think, well, that person is somehow better than me. And what I realise now is that they're just different to me in terms of their skill and their knowledge. And the third thing, you said you still get this, and so do I. And most recently, I had it when you invited me to sit on this panel. Mistake. I looked at everybody else's bios. I thought, oh, no. It must have been an erroneous email. And to that third point, I think it's really important to acknowledge that when we immediately diminish other people's invitations to us to be part of something, not only are we doubting ourselves, we're also seeing by extension, I doubt you and your judgment. And I absolutely don't doubt you and your judgment. So it's helpful to remember that other people are seeing something and inviting me here for a reason. But yeah, it's alive and kicking, and I know you'll talk later about how that can be helpful. So that's thank you.
Great, thanks, Nikki, and thanks for your candour, because all of this will only works if everybody really opens up and is honest. Sally, can I maybe come to you next, and again just pose the same question around your own reflections of your experience of imposter syndrome?
Yes, thank you, Julian. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. I absolutely love Scotland, especially Glasgow. I know there are people from all your different firms, but I'm gutted we're not in person, because I was looking forward to a wee dram. And perhaps not at 11 o'clock in the morning. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Well, I've got a lot to say on the subject. I can see somebody has written in there, I've been waiting all year, all my life for this webinar. My feeling of imposter syndrome really started, I think I was about 23 when I first experienced it. And let me just give you the context that for me, it's intersectional, because, you can see I'm a different color to everybody else, a different hairstyle. So there's all that going on as well. But from a gender point of view, and I was going for an interview for scholarship at Gray's Inn. So I'm at the bar, and we have to belong to one of the 4 Inn. And this chap outside, who didn't look like me, was asking what my father did. And I thought that was a very odd question. And my parents are doctors. So I told him, and he said, "Oh, not in law. You're not going to get anywhere. Oh, God, and you're a woman. And you're black." So I thought, Jesus Christ. And, it was just before, sorry to blaspheme, before I went in for this interview, because in those days, you all sit outside waiting to be called in. And he threw me, because I thought, shit, I'm black and I'm a woman. And I thought, talk about stating the obvious. Excuse me, I've just sworn. Forgive me, I should have given notice. I won't do it again, Julian. But it was a bit of a shocker, because I did think, oh gosh, this is going to affect me. So I went in there, nailed it. But it put me off so much. I was so nervous, And it's not like now where, I'm 44 and I would have said something funny or witty to put them at ease, or when other occasions to happen. So that was kind of the first time. But professionally, my career as a criminal barrister is full of men. And so often, I would be mistaken for the pupil or the trainee supervisor. And now, of course, I've got lots of barristers that I've trained myself, that I have to sort of talk to them about these occurring, because that affects your professionalism. So it's a whole other barrier that we're dealing with so far as perception of others of us. But the actual imposter syndrome for me is that feeling of, am I good enough? Actually, have they made a mistake? Julian mentioned I've got an MBE. I haven't written it on there because I don't feel the need to scribble it everywhere. I have it on that banner because the publishers like it and for court hearings. But even when I went to Windsor Castle, where they're expecting you, they know I'm coming there with my husband and my son. I thought somebody's going to come any minute now, tap me on the shoulder and say, sorry, we made a mistake. And then when I went up, because the Queen was ill, so I couldn't have the Queen, it was Princess Anne. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm a royalist or whatever, but I was really proud when whoever nominated me, I don't know who it is, that letter came. Even then I thought, this is wrong. So on the day that I went to receive my gong, as it were, I did think Princess Anne was going to say, Sally Penny, I think you're in the wrong place. So they've been some of the occasions. But professionally, the first time I appeared in the High Courts, I was really crapping it. And I mean, we'll talk later on about ways that we deal with it and have dealt with it. And Julian, stop me if I'm going on. But I remember feeling sick and then going to the loo and then, feeling like absolutely hideous and thinking, oh my God, they're going to find me out. My skeleton argument's no good and blah, blah. And then I had to stop and kind of think, no, I'm here. I've got leave to be here because of my work. I've bloody earned it. Now, that doesn't come naturally, and that's not just overnight. That's a whole other set of things going on, but it still lives with me now, and it does still, reside with us. And I'm very keen to talk about harnessing it, finding the positivities of how we can, so it doesn't deliberate. You know what I mean?
It's not a debilitating, and I think we'll come back to that, because I think as we'll come on to explore later on, I think there are a number of positive things, and I think we will all recognise in ourselves the way that we choose to try and deal with it and cope with that feeling of I'm in the wrong place, or I'm just about to be found out. So let's pick up that thread in a moment. Emma, can I come to you? And again, same question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gillian. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting.
247. No pressure, Emma.
Now feeling that you're in the wrong place is definitely resent. So I guess it's been really interesting to reflect on imposter syndrome, particularly over the last few weeks, because I think, like many people, I'd probably thought that I experienced it most in the workplace, and that's definitely true. I second guess my decisions often. I am forever waiting on that email to come through that alerts everyone to the fact that actually I've been winging this the whole way through and getting away with it. Thankfully, in case my boss is on the call, I don't think that's come through yet. But the bit that probably was striking to me from our discussions over the past few weeks is that despite, and we'll come on to all the positives that I've had and others experienced through volunteering and being part of organisations like WAGs and Girl Guiding, but despite that, I still feel imposter syndrome in that area, and I see it in my volunteer colleagues as well. And I think that's really underlined for me that it's not just about gender, particularly in Girl Guiding. We are majority, almost all senior leaders are all females. And so it can't just be about gender in that space. And although it is very supportive, I definitely have heard others reflect on the fact that they are waiting for the tap on the shoulder as well. And I was going to say I'm lucky enough to be, and I do feel lucky, but that maybe underlines how I feel about it. But I've been lucky enough to have been appointed to a number of roles in guiding at a younger age than would historically have been the case. And that's often meant that I haven't taken the same route as others in the room have. I've had less experience in different roles or certain roles throughout the various levels that there are in Girl Guiding. And I definitely am aware that I have a heightened sense of everything that I say or write or do for fear of being seen as being too young or immature or inexperienced to be sitting in that room. And definitely as I've progressed in work and in guiding, those feelings have subsided in some ways and increased in others. And logically, I know that others must see value in my contribution, but I definitely struggle with reconciling that with the underlying doubt.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting, isn't it? So first of all, you're not lucky to have got your positions in Girl Guiding. You're fortunate, and they are lucky to have you. But those that nerves that we all feel when we take on new challenges and new opportunities, and we all know logically that stretches us and that pushes us out of our comfort zone and allows us to take on new challenges and allows us to grow and develop. But it doesn't stop, just to go back with the wonderful imagery that I think Nikki's company has around the gremlin that just kind of sits on your shoulder, sort of saying, you shouldn't really be here, you shouldn't really be here. I think that's difficult to manage. So there's that logical side of your brain, I think, which knows, as Sally said, you've got the qualifications, you've got leave of the court, you've been invited here, you've been instructed, you've been appointed, whatever it happens to be. And yet your emotional side is still trying to kind of, undermine that. There's lots of really nice comments coming through on the chat function, so thank you very much for that. And again, I'll just remind you about the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen if you want to pose questions to the panel. As I say, we'll come back and pick them up later on. So Sally, can I come back to you? We've talked about how each of us have found that imposter syndrome feels for us kind of personally. But part of having the opportunity to talk like this, and again, I'm really grateful to all of you for your candor. And I was reflecting that I don't even think 10 years ago we would have had a conversation like this, and we would have we would have used International Women's Day as a way of, quite rightly, of being very empowering, but I actually think that it's very empowering listening to other people's experiences and that feeling that you're not alone. So one of the things I'd like to explore, Sally, with you is, have you had the opportunity to use that experience of feeling like an outsider to help, I don't know, other peers or team members who you can see are maybe feeling the same experiences, that imposter syndrome feeling, and help them to manage and address that?
Yes, I have. That's a big question. Crikey, Gillian. Jeez. So I have. The short answer is yes, but it allowed me to expand and indeed indulge on it. Firstly, because I felt like this, I thought there must be loads of women who feel like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, men also suffer from imposter syndrome, and and I'm not anti-men. I love them so much. I married one, and I've got 2 sons and a daughter. So that's a different conversation with men. They just don't talk about it as much, and I think they have better coping mechanisms and more bravado. For me, what I've done is actually pointed out to colleagues. So when, for example, judicial appointments come up, or boards, board positions, because they're really good places to kind of gain experience of sort of outside the workplace and bring some awareness to the firms and organizations in the day job. So I, for example, will suggest I'm an ambassador for something called Women on Boards, for example. So I will suggest to colleagues, why don't you go for that committee? Maybe the Family Justice Committee, maybe arbitration, maybe, networking group for women or men, because different things work for different people. So I suggest some of the things, and sometimes the baby things, to gain confidence. When the big jobs or roles come up, so whether it's vice chair of something or so on, and I suggest it to colleagues, they say no, I'm not good enough, I don't have an experience. And I think, well, I've been at the bar for 22 years. And so I'm suggesting it to you. Like, a colleague of mine is a circuit judge. She applied 7 times and she was going to give up. And I was like, go for it. I mean, what have you got to lose? And it was on that 7th attempt that she got it. And I remember when she was sworn in, she sent me a text because she just couldn't believe it. And I'm a big believer in gratitude. So it's very easy to allow the gremlin to take us over. Those moments that you get, even when it's outside of the professional scenario, when there's a PTA and, no one really knows who you are, but you're trying to give up, when you've baked a cake that then doesn't rise. It's like, oh, for God's sake, it's chocolate brownies even, doesn't rise. So you've got to then do something. Go to the shop and put some flour on it and, hand over, right? That deals with that imposter syndrome of being the world baker and a Mary Berry and so on and so forth. We all like watching the program, reading it, but we can't be good at everything. So one of the ways I've harnessed is to say, look, what are you good at? Stop it when I say, why don't you put yourself forward for this? Or why don't you offer to do that? And say, what are you good at? I know this is one of the things you're good at. And I often think it's helpful to have not just our mums, but like a little line of people that one trusts, professional women who you can go to that can give you an honest opinion. So a lot of my solicitors, one of the things I do, the solicitors I instruct me, when they've done a good job, I say, that was really good, because I do what I'm demanding of my solicitors. When we're on a case together, I ask them to do, stuff, but that's my job and I'm carrying the can. And if you've got to go to pick your kids up, go and I'll do the work. But when we win a case, we go for a big boozy lunch. Now, some of my solicitors are Asian, so they're not going to want any booze, right? We all know that. So I suggest something else, an afternoon tea, for example. But the good job goes beyond that, because you're good. You want other people to realize you're good and you want to save that moment. So I write an email, copy in the direct supervisor, and then I copy in the managing partner, and I blind copy them in so that they know. And I said, I'd like this to be taken into account whenever an appraisal arises or a senior associate role is coming up, or indeed partnership. And the reason I blind copy, my solicitor in is so that they have something. You can't call it an IS file because that's something else, or an ISD file. But I try to call it a brag file, or a bloody brilliant file. So that in those moments when you think, oh God, I can't do it, when that gremlin or the goblin is on you, and you really, that voice is saying, you can just open the file, or maybe print it off and read it. You can keep it on. So that's one of the things that And I know a man who carries lots of positive comments in his wallet. He's laminated them, and he's quite senior. You wouldn't expect it, would you? Yeah. But they're one of the things I do as a positive. And so I found that that's been a good driver. And I've harnessed some of the imposter syndrome, certainly in positive ways.
So there's two brilliant points I'd just like to pick up there, Sally. I think the first one is that that feeling of being an imposter in the PTA. So even on the days you think you've got work licked, and then all of a sudden you have to go to something at the kids' school or a sports day or something like that. And there's the super mums who are brilliant at that. Yeah. And you feel like an outsider or an imposter there, that you're not a proper mum. That resonates with me quite a lot. But I have a thing which I stole from somebody else. I'll credit it to Jo McSween, because I listened to her saying this a number of years ago. And I now have what I in my inbox in my email it's known as a GOB file, which sounds awful, but it stands for glimpses of brilliance. So if I ever get anything which is positive feedback for me, or I get anything which is positive feedback for any of my team, as well as it getting shared with them, it goes into the GOB file, and the GOB file gets regularly reviewed. It gets reviewed, obviously, like kind of formal things like appraisals and feedback. It also gets reviewed when people are having a crappy day, whether that's me or them, and we will bring back out the GOB file and we will talk about the glimpses of brilliance, just to kind of reassure and steel people that they're ready, they're ready for the next challenge. One of the things, another theme just to pick up that you said, Sally, there was, because this is not a female, and we're talking about it obviously in the context of International Women's Day, but this is not exclusively a female phenomenon. And I was interested, Nikki, in just maybe picking up with you on what thoughts you have of spotting imposter syndrome in others, because I do think that typically men and women do react to imposter syndrome in different ways. And I think it's not always obvious how it manifests itself in other people. And I can certainly look back on some challenging relationships in the past, and now through different eyes think, was that kind of aggression or confidence, or was that actually their imposter syndrome manifesting itself in a different way? So yeah, Nikki, I'd be interested in, do you think it manifests itself differently in men and women?
Yeah, I do. And can I just say, I've got a nice stuff file, but I am renaming it to the GOB file or rag file. Fantastic. So when I am working with a coaching client early on, we look at how to identify the times, the places, the people, the situations that wake up the gremlin and the imposter syndrome. And time again, what I hear women say to me is that they almost do a preemptive thing, which is they tell everybody how rubbish they are, because then they think it demonstrates self-awareness. If I think I'm rubbish and I tell you that, then at least we're on the same page. That's one thing that happens. But often nobody else is thinking that about you. So why are you telling them to look out for you being rubbish? But men, on the other hand, tend not to talk about that. They tend to keep it to themselves. And the downside of that is it can often preclude asking for help. And I think as a general theme, something about if you know someone looking for a change in their typical behaviour, so the noisy, garrulous person who becomes very quiet, or vice versa. And I love that point that you made there, Julian, about when you reflect on people and you've had a response from them that we initially interpret it as being quite aggressive. It's often fear-driven, and it's a way of defending the self. I think there's a couple of other things, and one is around a change in people's attitudes. So somebody who you would think of as being quite optimistic suddenly becoming the most terrible pessimism. And I do it, something goes wrong and I think, right, first of all, I'll get the sack. And then secondly, the world economy will collapse and it'll all be my fault. None of those things have happened yet, to Emma's earlier point. But actually working on our optimism in the face of setbacks is definitely an important thing to do. And Sally alluded to that as well. because I wrote in my notes to myself ahead of today, it's not about failure being an option, it's about failure being a reality.
Yeah.
So, and for all of us, men and women, being able to acknowledge that things haven't worked out the way that we would have liked, and then think about what we do differently. And I think there's one more thing I'd like to mention, which is around asking for help generally. I said a moment ago, men don't do it as much in my experience. I think it can also be tempting for all of us when our imposter syndrome has us in its grip to think, I'm really going to have to try to work this out. And as we've heard from our own contributions and seen from the comments in the chat function so far this morning, people have got it. You know, they say that at least 7 out of 10 people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And I think, what, only 7 out of 10? Everybody.
What are the other 3 doing?
Yeah, they need some feedback happening there. So in summary, looking for changes in people's behaviours, but acknowledging that we as women in particular have to stop telling everybody that we're rubbish and expecting that to be validated, because that is emotional and not logical.
And there's a brilliant comment I've just picked up in the chat function saying, somebody has contributed to say that imposter syndrome coats people with Teflon because praise then just bounces off. And I think that's a brilliant way of describing that. So just coming back to the point that I made earlier, so I suppose we've been focusing there on the negatives of imposter syndrome, how it's made us feel, making us feel uncomfortable, making us feel as if we're just about to be found out. But I was actually speaking to a senior male colleague ahead of this event, because I knew that he had done some speaking on this topic himself. And he actually had a really interesting perspective, because although he identified, or could identify, the way he felt as imposter syndrome now, he actually said that his coping strategies around preparing, around attention to detail, making sure that he was always the best prepared person in any meeting, and projecting confidence that you don't necessarily feel inside, that kind of duck swan gracefully sliding over the water with the feet paddling underneath. He actually said to me that he felt that those traits and the way he approached his work had actually equipped him to be better at his role, and that he questioned whether, without that feeling that he was about to be tapped on the shoulder all the time, would he actually have gone on to challenge himself and get into the roles that he subsequently went in to perform, as I say, at a very senior level. And so I think that's an interesting way of looking at imposter syndrome as well. And Sally, you and I have talked before about being court lawyers and preparing for court, and that kind of attention to detail and agonizing over every word you're going to say or every word you put into your skeleton argument. These are all traits that I think are possibly driven by not wanting to do the best and not wanting to be caught out. So I just wondered whether that feeling that actually there are positives we can take with that resonates with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great. Yes, it does. And let me give you one other example, if I may. I became a bencher, and a bencher is like a governance role. I don't know if you've got them in Scotland. So yeah, they're kind of like Neds or trustees of each of the 4 inns. And
Okay.
Everyone is like older than all of us put together on here, and they're all the boys. But to become a bencher, certainly in my inn, is smaller and so on. It's much more traditional than all the others. You have to be elected. And you have to propose. I've no idea if anybody did. And the positive was this. So a friend of mine phoned me, usually for gossip. He's a judge now in London, but he lives in Manchester. And so he's sort of a bit out of it. So we were having this conversation on the phone in the pandemic and beginning. And then at the end of it, he said, "Oh, whatever happened about you becoming a bencher?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, I voted for you." I said, "Oh, right." I said, "I don't know anything about it. And obviously I'm not a bencher, so I obviously didn't get it." And it was a throwaway comment at the end of a conversation about a whole load of other irrelevant things, as I say, just gossiping about how everybody is. And I was so upset. And it really knocked me off, thinking there's obvious, because you have to be voted. There are, hundreds of other benchers who have to vote for you if you are. And I really thought, oh my God, even Baroness Hale, who I know very well, she's in my inn, she obviously didn't vote for me. And I went on a complete kind of like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I am not good enough. And the rest of them are Court of Appeal judges, Supreme Court judges, etc., etc. So I was absolutely gutted about it. Anyway, and then eventually I got over it by speaking to a friend of mine who's in Silk. And he said, he's a wonderful man. And I don't just hang around with the men, but it's always good to get their perception, isn't it? You know, often when we're kind of thinking, this is just us, I normally go to my girlfriends first. And he was saying that he was encouraged to apply to be a deputy High Court judge. And it was really awful. And the feedback was so dreadful, he wasn't going to again. And so I thought, well, okay, I don't feel so bad. Move forward sometime later, I received a letter from the Treasurer saying, we'd like to invite you to become a bencher. Over 200 and whatever, more than on this call, voted for you. Would you like to be? And I thought, wow, gosh. And I thought, yeah, no. I just thought, no, thank you. So I replied saying, thank you so much. What a great opportunity, but I don't think that I'm fully qualified and you've got plenty of benches. And this Treasurer wrote to me and said, I don't think you understand. People don't refuse. And so I said, oh, I see, but I'll think about it. And so the positive, so I thought, okay, I'll be it. Why don't I take the opportunity and let aside my imposter syndrome? Because then I did think, oh, right, they've obviously voted for me and maybe they thought it was a mistake. I don't know. But I'm not sure that I still do want to go to meetings with the Supreme Court judges on variety of subjects. And it was still playing in the back of my mind. But I use that as a positive, say, I'm going to do it. And then I can say to them, why haven't we got an International Women's Day event? Why aren't we celebrating Black Lives Matter? Why aren't we having more Scottish advocates coming to join our inn? You know, there's a variety of subjects that I'm really interested in, the ways in which I think our professions can work better. And so as a small example, I use it as a positive. The other thing I did was that, and I don't share this very often, was that I applied for Silk reluctantly again. And you're supposed to use these consultants. And I thought, well, if I can't fill in a form, what's the point in applying to be Silk? And my friend said, oh, but at least you should at least talk to one. So I talked to one, but I didn't use him in the end. He was very good. And he said to me, do you know, you've got imposter syndrome, and it's really good to use it as a positive and go for it. And even if you don't get it, you know, nobody really gets it anymore first time, and it makes you better as a lawyer. And I thought, you know, he was bloody right. It was really interesting. And do you know what? I have spoken to, you know, at least 18 women, because there are many women Silks, right, including one in Scotland who is brilliant. And she didn't get it the first time. And I thought, actually, now I know what the form is like. Now I know what they require. Now I know what the references require. Now I know, actually, it's about not just about your cases and all the nuances of it. So I do think that when we get it, we need to harness it. And nothing is ever achieved in the comfort of our homes or indeed in our jobs. You've got to take a punt for the partnership. You know, obviously qualified and competent, but that's not what imposter syndrome is about. It's the doubting feeling. And I think that we've got to use it. You know, I'm a high adrenaline person. I used to love bungee jumps and so on and so forth. I think we need to harness it. If we're getting too comfy in doing certain cases and what have you, you've got to, I'm really into intellectually stimulating cases. So I love anything with a bit of law in it. That's how I started writing legal books. But I was petrified of writing books. I thought no one would buy them and no one would read them. They never become an Amazon bestseller, whatever. You know, you've got to use it, because the comfort zone isn't actually the place we want to be. We want to feel challenged and we want to do it. And just as I finished, Julian, I kind of feel like we all need like a Nikki on our desk. I think we all need a gob file, and we're all guides, really. So I think this panel is great because I've already jotted down. I feel like we need Nikki, you know, there with us. Plus, she's got great wallpaper. So I do think we can really harness a positivity, and already we're talking about it and getting tips from one another. Yeah. You know? And I do think that we shouldn't let it drown us, but we can harness it.
And I think there's a really good point there, because, you know, resilience is an integral part of what we need to do to be successful at work anyway.
Yeah.
Or successful in our home lives, successful in our families. Resilience is just something that we all have to develop. And it's, I suppose, separating out that the natural knocks of life, because life is not always going to go your way. You're not going to get things first time. You're not going to be, brilliant at everything you do. But it's separating out what is just the natural part of life and the things you have to get up and dust yourself down and move on, from that feeling that it's about you, because sometimes it's not about you. If the system is that you don't get promoted to silk or whatever the first time of applying, or that's very rare, then don't expect, just that's part of it, but don't let it think, oh, well, that's me and I'm not entitled to be here and I shouldn't be going for these things. Maybe you'll get it on the second time, or maybe they do have a point that you've got to develop your skills in a particular area, and then you will be better qualified to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to come back to you, Emma, with one final point, and then I'm going to come on to questions, because I can see my colleagues are very efficiently putting them into my WhatsApp, so I'll pick them up in a wee moment. So just before we come on to questions, so as I said at the beginning, Emma, I think it took me probably well into my 30s before I realised imposter syndrome for what it was, and certainly before I talked to other people about it and realised that they felt the same way as well. And obviously labelling it as a female issue is, I think, perpetuating the gender bias, when today we're here because we're supposed to be breaking the bias and making our contribution towards that. But I just wondered, given your experience with Girl Guiding, whether there are strategies that you think, particularly younger people, male or female, could be used to help address imposter syndrome, and if there's anything you could share with us from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things in terms of individual things that we might want to do, but also things that we could or should be, as organisations, pushing to change, to make it, to try and reduce that feeling amongst our staff and volunteers. On an individual level, I guess one thing that I did, which has kind of come up already, around having people around you to share those feelings with. I not off my own bat, but in a safe space, I shared with some senior volunteers how I felt when I was in those committees and boardrooms, and how I worried about what they might think when I spoke. And what was really interesting was it was a complete shock to them that I was feeling that way, and they certainly didn't see me in that way. They saw me as an equal in the room. And so that has then led to reassurance for me, but also I think it was a nudge for them that I was feeling that way, and they were completely unaware. So I now get semi-regular feedback or support from them, positive feedback when it's appropriate, I guess. And that I've definitely noticed that change. And so it wasn't necessarily that they weren't thinking it, but they didn't realise that I was feeling the way that I was. So I'm not saying that everyone should go out and share with every single person they work with how they're feeling all the time, to Nikki's point earlier. But I do think one aspect that was really powerful for me on that was it was about sharing and getting that reassurance from my peers in the role that I felt insecure in. So it's great to hear it from your mum, and she will always tell you, and maybe your partner or who it might be. But if you can find a person or people who are in the environment that you feel insecure in, that you feel comfortable sharing it with, and they can look out for it more or provide more support, I think there's something a bit powerful in that. As an organisation, I guess I've been in guiding since I was 6, and throughout the benefit of organisations, any type of volunteering, but organisations like Girl Guiding, are that you take on leadership roles at all ages and stages, and I think that really empowers and builds your confidence. So if you're finding if it's your work environment or another environment that you're not feeling that confidence and empowerment, then I would look for it in other spaces. I certainly feel empowered in work because of the roles that I have in guiding, and work also. The skills that I've learned in my role as a lawyer have undoubtedly helped in my role in guiding. And so in some ways, they both build my confidence and remove some of that imposter syndrome while I'm in the other role. And Sally mentioned earlier about encouraging people to take board positions, and I think when you're doing your day job, sometimes I think you don't realise the skills that you have that other sectors or environments might need. And so I've always found that in girl guiding, the legal skills that I have, which I see as sometimes see as a very small part of my day job, are really valuable in that environment. And it can really boost your confidence if you sit on a board or give some of your time and skills to another area. And then I guess just a small point, as organisations, I think it's about showing that we're not all super people and don't always get everything right, that perfection doesn't necessarily need to be what we expect from everyone all the time, and finding different ways to success and different ways of leading, which I think I found in my assistant chief guide role. I have got into that role by having different volunteering roles than maybe seemed to be the natural progression, and that has definitely made me feel like an imposter at times. But I'm there and I'm doing the role, and what I want to show other people is that there isn't just one route to this role. And I think if we could do that more in our organisations so that it's more accessible and visible that there are different ways of being successful and different ways of progressing.
Well, as you've been speaking, Emma, I've been watching the chat and you'll be delighted. So we've already got Claire M is looking into girl guiding for her daughters as a result of what you've just said, which is fantastic. And somebody else said, Julie B said that girl guiding has given her fantastic leadership opportunities, which have definitely helped in her work. So that is clearly striking a chord. And I think I would agree, my experience, I took on some external board positions and sat on audit and risk committees for a couple of organisations. And although I wasn't there for my legal skills, it made me kind of appreciate those transferable skills that are just sort of part and parcel of what you do every day. Mm-hmm. And I find that a really positive experience, seeing that those experiences are recognised and valuable. And I know in the background on the call, we've got Vicky, one of our colleagues in our gender focus group, who's helped arrange the event. And I know that she's been working with a wonderful organisation called Pilot Light, which we've supported for about the last decade or so, which matches people up, people with from industry and business and the professions with charities who need additional support and skills from a whole range of people, whatever your skill set is. And if your employer or your organisation is not already part of Pilot Light, then I would highly recommend it, because we've had about 7 or 8 of our partners or senior colleagues have gone through Pilot Light supporting these charities over the course of the last decade or so, and without fail, they have all found that to be a brilliant experience, and one that has really helped them develop their confidence and their skills and see how they can be applied in a different way. So thank you very much, Emma, for your perspective from girl guiding, and I think you can start making up a few more of those brown uniforms if that's what you still wear these days. Okay, so I'm just coming through to the chat. So a brilliant question that certainly resonated with me, and it's so the questioner says that they often find it hard to speak up or make suggestions during meetings because they doubt themselves and think, what if everybody thinks this is a stupid question? What if it makes me look like I don't know what I'm doing? And so the questioner is saying, do you have any advice for building confidence, speaking up or asking questions without doubting yourself? So just while you're pondering that, panelists, what I would say was, when I overcame that feeling of I'm not going to ask the question because everybody's going to think I'm stupid and everybody else has already worked out what the answer was, I would say, oh, sorry, can you just explain to me, why does this happen this way, or why do we do things that way? And all of a sudden, everybody else in the room would kind of look at each other and go, oh, actually, that is a very good question. And so that actually has empowered me to ask those questions a lot more. And I now, as I'm sure many of you do, there is no such thing as a stupid question, because if it's going through your mind, either we haven't explained what we're talking about well enough, or there is an issue that needs to be addressed. So that would be my kind of reaction to that. But Nikki, you must come across that. People who are stepping up in their roles, stepping into maybe more leadership positions, and they're suddenly surrounded by more experienced people, whether that's in a board or a committee or whatever, and they don't want to open up and ask the question for fear that they will then be found out, to use our phrase that we've been using. What do you have any advice for building confidence?
Yes, I do. First thing is try and come into every single room, whether virtual or real, as if everyone there is delighted to see you. Now, it might not be, but that's okay. It takes you out of yourself. Secondly, we hear that phrase, fake it till you make it a lot. And I don't mean fake competence, because part of knowing what we don't know is really powerful, but faking the confidence to ask that question as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And I can remember being at a conference a number of years ago, panel discussion with two very well-known, very esteemed researchers and consultants talking on a topic, and I was sitting there thinking, I have literally no idea what's going on. And eventually someone in the audience said, could I please clarify what we're talking about? And there was a ripple across the whole room. The whole room went, yes, I don't know either. So what I think is, if I don't understand, the chances are that other people don't as well. So ask it, give yourself time, take your time, put your voice up, and know that you'll be helping other people as well as yourself. It's called pluralistic ignorance, this thing that if we're sitting in a group and we're confused, we tend to look at the people round about us to see if they're giving away any signs of not knowing what's happening. And if they look okay, we think, I'll not bother. But when one person takes the risk, everybody else takes it too. So we're helping.
Great advice there. Thanks, Nikki. Another question that's come through, and this builds on some of your comments you made earlier on, Sally, from a sort of intersectionality perspective. So this questioner says that sweaty palms, dry mouth, and that awful feeling of anxiety when you want to make a point, but you remain silent because you're the only woman of colour in the room and you feel like a complete imposter. Now, I suspect that you have had that experience before. What advice would you give to that questioner?
Yeah, that's a great question, because not just about the women of colour aspects, but people who are neurodiverse, perhaps they think they're going to get the questions muddled up or whatever. Because I still have it now. I sit on an arts board where you think, I don't know anything about the arts, or I'm not a natural singer, but in fact, theatres are just businesses, so they've got to make money, and they've got to put things on that people want to watch. If you apply the basic economy. So my answer is really that feeling, you get better at it. So the first thing I would say is ask it, and ask it early. I'm a great fan of competence. So one of the ways I deal with my own imposter syndrome is competence. I make sure I'm bloody good. I know we all think we are, but sometimes we're not. And when the doubt comes, actually, I make sure I know more than everybody else in the room. So, for example, might be if you're in a meeting or a board meeting, make sure you've read everything on those papers, and perhaps check maybe any updates that there are. See if there's anything that's come out in the news, or indeed, anything from the regulator, whatever. And so I tend to do that. I tend to sort of maybe slightly over prepare because I don't like bravado. And as Julian was saying, actually, when I ask the questions and a lot of the boards I sit on, then you feel like the baddie. So now I just caveat and say, I'm sorry to ask a barristorial question or a loyal question or whatever. So actually I'm saying to you, look, I'm a professional woman in this meeting and I'm asking the question, and you should take me seriously. So that's a caveat I say in that way. Sometimes I'm a bit more jokey. So I sit on a board where there's a chap who's been on that board for 40 years. And and the board wasn't terribly diverse. I'm one of the few people on there. So for him, I often say, oh, Jeffrey, close your ears. I'm going to ask a question now about women. And everyone laughs. And then I ask then I go in to ask a specific question, or I get him to tell us what happened in 1984, because few of us were very young or whatever, so that he feels he's still included in it. So I think the short answer is you've got to ask it early, because often in meetings, women wait right till the end to ask the questions that they need to. And everybody goes, oh yeah, I wanted to find that out. And what the point Nikki was making is really important. But own it and own your question, and say sometimes, is this a stupid question, or have we lost, £500,000 looking at the accounts? And everyone goes, oh yeah, oh. you know, or whatever it is. So I'd make sure that you're on point, because if you're not, and it is a stupid question, you'll feel like it's stupid. Do you know what I mean? So always.
And it's not going to be a stupid question, but that point about owning it early, I think, is really important, because I've also had situations where you do finally get the courage to speak up and ask the question, and then people start saying, oh right, yes, that's something, but then it's like, oh, we'll have to come back to that later because we've run out of time, because we've only got 2 more minutes, or we've overrun on this, so we'll come back, so I'll take it offline and speak to you later, which is then quite a kind of humiliating, all right, so it's just you that has the problem here. So owning it and speaking up early and asking it, because if it's a really simple question, and if you are the one who has misunderstood it, then somebody will be able to explain it in 30 seconds, and then they can move on with the rest of the agenda items in the meeting. So I think that's great. I'm really conscious of time. There's loads of questions. I wish we'd actually scheduled this for a bit more. So there's another question that has come in, which Emma, I'll maybe ask you, maybe unfair, but given you're dealing with young women, I'm going to pose this to you, but I'll give my own thought first. So any tips on how to instill a can-do attitude in children? My daughter always says she can't do something and will very rarely go out of her comfort zone. And it would be great to nip this in the bud while she's still young, age 12, as I can see her being a key candidate for imposter syndrome in the future. So I've got 2 daughters, one 12, 115. The 12-year-old thinks she can do absolutely everything and is planning a career as a professional footballer and doesn't see any reason why that may not be successful. But my older daughter is very much more in that camp. And what I've tried to do is say, you can't do that yet. And then we talk about what are we going to do to be able to do that practice, or whatever it happens to be. So that's certainly how I've done that. And certainly I've spent a bit of time with young people who've involved in kind of competitive sport, elite sport at a high level, and they always talk about a growth mindset and that ability to not to see barriers, just to see the next stage of your challenge and how to move yourself forward. So I think that's been very beneficial with my children in terms of how to stop them seeing that as a complete barrier to their progression. But do you come across that, Emma, with the young ladies that young women that you're working with?
Absolutely, definitely. And I think, I obviously would plug Girl Guiding here, but I think organisations like Girl Guiding give children a chance to succeed, absolutely, to challenge themselves, but also a chance to fail in a safe place, an environment where they might not succeed every time, but they'll try it again, and it gives them achievement because they get badges and that sort of thing. So I think for me, it is about being able to fail. I think I see it in, I have a to-be stepdaughter, and she's similar because she really hates to fail. And the thing that we're trying to work with her on is it's fine not to get it right every time. And you're right, you can't do it yet, but you will.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can see time is marching on, unfortunately. So I'm just going to bring this event to a close. First of all, can I thank all 230 of you who've joined us today? I'm absolutely delighted. Thank you for making this such a success. Can I also thank Sally and Nikki and Emma for joining us and for their fantastic contributions. Thank you to you all for all your questions and all your comments in the chat function. That's been tremendous, and we will send out a link with a recording and a link to the various resources, both from Kissing with Confidence and from WAGS. And have a wonderful day, everybody, and thank you very much.